The courtroom was full. People whispered, eyes wide with curiosity. A 10-year-old boy stood in the center, his small hands covered with metal handcuffs. His name was Malik. He wore an oversized orange jumpsuit. It made him look even smaller. He did not cry. He did not speak. He only looked down at his feet. The judge, a serious man with silver hair, looked at the boy through his glasses. "This court has never seen something like this," he said in a cold voice. A 10-year-old child, refusing to speak, refusing to explain what he did. A woman in the back whispered, "What kind of crime can a small boy do?" Another man said, "He must be dangerous if they brought him in chains." The room was tense. Cameras clicked. Journalists were taking notes. Some people had come just to see the boy with their own eyes. He was called the Silent Boy. No one knew the full story, not even the police. 3 days ago, Malik had been found standing outside a broken house, holding a red backpack. Inside the house, a man was lying on the floor, unconscious. Blood was on the walls. The police thought it was Malik's father. Malik didn't say a word, not even his name. When they asked what happened, he stayed quiet. When they yelled, he stayed quiet. When they cried, he still stayed quiet. Now, here he was, standing in court, still saying nothing. The judge slammed his hammer. "This is serious," he said loudly. "You will not speak. You will not defend yourself. I have no choice." People leaned forward in their seats. "I order that this child be sent to juvenile detention," the judge said. "He will stay there until further notice." Gasps filled the room. "No, he's just a child," someone shouted. The judge ignored the voices. He looked at Malik one last time. "If you won't tell the truth, then you must face the result." The guards came closer. One of them, a tall man with a scar on his face, grabbed Malik's arm. Malik didn't fight. He just walked quietly as they led him away. But something strange happened. As Malik walked past the front row of the courtroom, an old woman looked at him and whispered, "I know your eyes, boy. They are like your father's." Malik looked up for the first time. Just for a second. His eyes met hers. Something passed between them. Something heavy. A memory. A secret. A warning. Then he looked down again. Outside the courtroom, rain had started. The sound of thunder rolled across the sky. It was as if the world itself was crying. The police van waited for Malik. He climbed inside without saying a word. The doors closed behind him with a loud bang. The crowd outside watched in silence as the van drove away. Inside the courtroom, a young female lawyer named Miss Carter sat at the very back. She had come only to observe, but now something didn't sit right in her heart. "That boy," she whispered to herself. "He doesn't look evil. He looks scared." She looked at her notebook. She had written nothing. Just one sentence stood out on the page. "Why is a 10-year-old too afraid to speak?" The case was over. For now. The people left the courtroom talking in hushed voices. Some were angry. Some were confused. Others didn't care. But one thing was clear. No one knew the truth. And the only person who did was too afraid to say it. That night, in his cold jail cell, Malik sat on the hard bed. The walls were gray. The air smelled of bleach. He still said nothing. Not even when a guard mocked him. Not even when another boy threw a paper ball at him. But when the lights went out and the hallway became quiet, Malik whispered 4 words into the dark. Words no one could hear. Words that could change everything. "I didn't do it." The next morning, Miss Carter couldn't stop thinking about the boy in handcuffs. She sat at her desk in the small legal office downtown, staring at the cold cup of coffee in front of her. Her mind was still in that courtroom. "Why didn't he speak?" she whispered. Her co-worker, James, looked up from his files. "Still thinking about that kid?" "Yes," she replied softly. Something was wrong. Everyone was so quick to send him away. But no one even tried to understand him. James shook his head. "Carter, we've got 5 real cases on our desk. That boy isn't your problem. He didn't ask for help." "I know," she said, "but maybe he couldn't." She picked up her bag and walked out. Back at the detention center, Malik sat alone in the small room. The walls were cold. His orange shirt hung loosely on his thin shoulders. Other kids in the center were laughing, fighting, or playing. But Malik didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared at the floor. The guards had already started calling him Mute Boy. One of the older boys came over and stood in front of him. "Hey," the boy said, "you think you're better than us because you don't talk." Malik looked up, his face empty. The boy slapped the tray of food off Malik's table and walked away, laughing. Malik didn't react. He just sat still, breathing slowly. But in his hand, hidden under the table, he held something. A tiny paper, folded many times. Inside it were shaky drawings, stick figures. One was of a tall man, another of a woman with long hair, and in the middle, a boy holding a red backpack. Miss Carter's visit. That evening, Miss Carter drove to the juvenile center. She showed her ID to the guard and asked to speak with Malik. "Are you his lawyer?" the man asked. "No," she said, "not yet." She waited inside a room with glass walls. A table and 2 chairs sat in the middle. A camera blinked in the corner. After 10 long minutes, Malik was brought in. He looked even smaller than before. His feet barely touched the ground when he sat. He stared at the table. "Hi, Malik," Miss Carter said gently. No reply. "I'm not here to hurt you," she continued. I want to understand." Malik blinked. His eyes stayed on the table. "I saw you in court," she said. "I saw how they treated you. I don't think it was fair." Still, no reply. She placed a small notepad and a pen on the table. "If you don't want to speak, maybe you can draw. Or write. Anything." Malik didn't touch the pen. She sighed. "You know, when I was a little girl, I was also scared to speak. People hurt someone I loved. I thought if I stayed silent, nothing worse would happen." Malik's fingers moved a little. "But I learned something," Ms. Carter said. "Silence doesn't always protect us. Sometimes it traps us." Suddenly, Malik's hand reached for the pen. Slowly, he started drawing. First, he drew a house, then a man, then a dark shape with no face, then fire. Miss Carter leaned closer. Her heart beat faster. "What's this?" she asked softly. Malik paused, then looked at her for the first time. His lips trembled. "Was someone hurting you, Malik?" she whispered. He didn't nod. He didn't speak. But his eyes filled with tears. A quiet alarm. Later that night, Miss Carter went back to her office. She placed Malik's drawing on the table. She stared at it for hours. Then she opened her laptop and started digging. She found old records. A man named Raymond Lewis, Malik's stepfather. He had a criminal past, 3 reports of violence, 2 dropped cases, no real punishment. Her hands began to shake. She called her boss. "I think that boy, he's not guilty. He's hiding from someone." Her boss sighed. "Carter, we can't open a case without evidence." "But what if the real story is darker than we think?" she asked. There was a pause. "I'll give you 2 days," her boss finally said. "But if there's no proof, we move on." Inside the cell, back at the center, Malik laid on his bed. The lights were dimmed. Other boys were asleep, but Malik stared at the ceiling. He clutched the little paper in his hand, the one he always kept hidden. Under his breath, he whispered, "Please believe me." He had finally drawn a part of the truth. But the darkest secret was still buried. And if no one found it in time, he knew someone else might get hurt. The next morning, Ms. Carter returned to her office with no sleep. Malik's drawing was still in her hand. She looked at it again and again. The dark shape in the picture haunted her. She opened her laptop and searched for any report of fire in Malik's neighborhood. One article popped up. House fire under investigation. No injuries reported. It was from 3 months ago. She clicked the story. Her heart dropped. The address. It was Malik's. The article was short. Just a few lines. A small fire broke out at a local home. Fire department says it started in the kitchen. Stepfather Raymond Lewis told police he was cooking dinner. No charges filed. No injuries. Ms. Carter whispered. Then where was Malik? She stared at the photo in the article. In the corner of the burned window, she saw something strange. A child's backpack, red, partly burned, just like the one in Malik's drawing. A visit to the neighborhood. Ms. Carter drove straight to the address. The house was still there, but the windows were boarded up. It looked cold, abandoned. She knocked on a neighbor's door. An older woman opened it, suspicious. "Can I help you?" "I'm a lawyer," Ms. Carter said. "Do you know what happened to the little boy who lived next door?" The woman looked around, then opened the door a bit wider. "You mean Malik?" "Yes," Carter said. The woman sighed. "That poor child. We heard screams that night. Then the fire trucks came. But the next day, the man said it was an accident. Said the kid ran away." "Did you see Malik after the fire?" The woman shook her head. "Not once. But I remember, the boy always looked scared, always quiet. And that man, he had a temper." "Thank you," Miss Carter said, her voice tight. Now she was sure. Malik wasn't a bad kid. He was running from something. Maybe someone. Back in court. The next morning, the courtroom was full again. Malik was brought in. He wore the same orange clothes, still handcuffed, still silent. Judge Hamilton looked tired. "Any progress?" he asked. Ms. Carter stood up. "Your Honor, I request the charges be paused. I found new evidence." The prosecutor rolled his eyes. Another lawyer chasing shadows. But the judge nodded. "Continue." Carter held up Malik's drawing. "I believe this is more than a child's scribble. It's a message. Malik has been hurt. He drew a man, a fire, and a house that matches his old home. That house had a fire, just like the picture." The judge frowned. "Go on." Carter handed over the article and the neighbor's statement. "And this backpack in the photo, it's in his drawing. He was there. Something happened to him." The judge looked at Malik. "Son, do you want to say anything?" Malik looked down. His lips moved. For the first time, he whispered, "He hit me," and locked me in the kitchen. Gasps filled the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. "Who?" Malik's voice was shaky. "My stepfather. He said if I told, he'd burn the house again, with me inside." Shockwaves. The courtroom fell into silence. Even the prosecutor sat still. Judge Hamilton's voice turned heavy. "Remove the handcuffs." A guard stepped forward and gently unlocked them. Malik rubbed his wrists slowly. Ms. Carter knelt beside him. "You were so brave," she whispered. The judge stood. "We will open a full investigation immediately. Malik will not go back to detention. He will be placed under protection." As the guards led Malik away, not to a cell, but to safety, people in the courtroom stood up, not out of order, but out of respect. Even the bailiff whispered, "That boy just broke my heart." Later that night, Miss Carter sat at her kitchen table, Malik's drawing in front of her. She smiled softly. He had finally spoken. He had faced his fear. And the courtroom, once cold and harsh, had listened. But in her heart, she knew one thing. This wasn't over. Raymond Lewis was still out there. And justice had only just begun. The news spread fast. Boy in handcuffs speaks out in court, names stepfather as abuser. The headline was all over the internet. Some believed the boy. Some didn't. But one man, Raymond Lewis, was watching the news in silence. He sat on his couch, a beer in one hand, remote in the other. His eyes locked on the screen. Malik's face came up. That quiet little boy had finally spoken. And now, the whole world knew. Raymond's face twisted into a cold smile. So the rat finally squeaked, he whispered to himself. Then he stood up, walked to the sink, and smashed the glass into pieces. Meanwhile, at the shelter, Malik was now living in a safe home, guarded and protected. It was a small place with soft beds and kind staff. He didn't speak much, but for the first time in months, he slept without fear. Miss Carter visited every evening. She brought coloring books and snacks. She never asked him to talk. She just sat beside him. One day, she brought him a new notebook. Malik smiled faintly. He opened it and began to draw. Trees, a dog, a sunny sky. Then, a face. A man's face with cold eyes and a fake smile. He wrote one word under it. He follows. Miss Carter gets a warning. The next morning, Miss Carter walked out of her apartment and found something strange. A small piece of paper taped to her car window. She pulled it off. It read, "Stop digging, or the kid won't be the only one who gets burned." Her hands froze. She looked around. Nobody in sight. Her heart raced, but she didn't throw the paper away. She took it straight to the police. "I think someone's watching me," she said. Detective Grant joins the case. The police finally assign someone to help. Detective Grant, a sharp, no-nonsense officer with a tired smile and eyes that had seen too much. He sat across from Miss Carter in the station. "So the boy's stepfather might be dangerous," he said, tapping his pen. "And now he knows we're looking at him." Miss Carter nodded. "He's not just dangerous. He's smart. He covers his tracks." Detective Grant leaned forward. "I'll look into him. But if this man hurt Malik, I promise he won't walk free." Raymond makes a move. That same night, Raymond Lewis drove to a dark parking lot. He met someone, tall, rough-looking, and wearing a hoodie. He handed the man an envelope. "I need information," Raymond said. "Find out where the lawyer's staying. And that kid, I want them watched." The man nodded without asking questions. Raymond looked around the empty lot. "No more surprises," he said. Then he got back into his truck and drove off. The fire returns. Back at the shelter, Malik was drawing again. This time, he colored the whole page red. Miss Carter asked softly, "What's this?" Malik didn't answer. But in the middle of the red flames, he drew a small figure, a boy with wide eyes. Then he whispered, "He's coming." The police tightened security. Detective Grant acted fast. Cameras were placed around the shelter. Patrol cars began circling the area. But the fear in Malik's eyes didn't fade. He didn't sleep that night. He just stared at the window. And in the morning, he said something that chilled Miss Carter to the bone. "The fire didn't start by accident last time. He did it, on purpose. I saw him pour the oil." He smiled when he lit the match. Court prepares for round 2. Judge Hamilton was preparing for a new hearing. This time, it was no longer about a boy who stole food. Now it was about child abuse, arson, and a possible murder attempt. The courtroom would be packed again. Reporters would come. Eyes would be watching. And deep in a quiet corner of the city, Raymond Lewis loaded a duffel bag into his car, with gloves, a lighter, and something wrapped in black cloth. He looked into his mirror and whispered, "They all think they've won, but they forgot. I don't lose." The courtroom was packed again. Reporters, lawyers, police, teachers, strangers. Everyone had come to hear the truth. But this time, the small boy was not the one on trial. This time, the man with the fake smile, Raymond Lewis, sat in the chair, handcuffed, dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit. But even in chains, he smiled. The judge's warning. Judge Hamilton sat tall and calm. His voice was serious. This is not a normal case. A child came to this court in silence, but broke that silence with truth. He looked at Raymond, and today we will hear what that child survived. The room went quiet. Even the cameras stopped clicking. Malik walks in. Malik entered the courtroom holding Miss Carter's hand. He wore a small gray suit. His shoes were too big. His hands shook, but his face was strong. The courtroom watched him walk past the man who used to hurt him. Raymond's eyes followed the boy, still smiling. But Malik didn't look away. He stopped, turned his head, and looked straight at him. For a few seconds, they just stared at each other. Then Malik turned and kept walking. The monster had no power anymore. The first words that shook the court. When Malik sat in the witness chair, the courtroom held its breath. The lawyer asked gently, "Malik, do you remember what happened the night of the fire?" Malik nodded. He looked at the judge and said in a clear voice, he said, "If I told anyone, he would burn everything." But that night, I heard him laughing. While the fire burned, while I screamed, the room went cold. Even the judge's hands tightened. The video evidence. Detective Grant stood up next. He placed a flash drive into the screen. A video played. The footage showed Raymond buying oil from a gas station 2 hours before the fire. Another video showed him walking near the house that night. Hoodie, gloves, lighter in his hand, gas cans in the truck. His smile was gone now. Raymond leaned forward. "That's not me." But the whole court had seen it, and Malik whispered to Miss Carter, "He's lying again." The twist, a hidden letter. Miss Carter stood up. "Your Honor," she said, "Malik gave me this. I didn't read it until today. But I think it's time." She handed the judge a letter. The judge opened it. It was written in shaky handwriting. Malik's handwriting. "If I disappear, if I get locked up, please tell the truth. He said I was nothing, that nobody would believe me. But I believe in myself now, and I believe you will too." The verdict. Judge Hamilton took a deep breath. He looked at Raymond. "You didn't just hurt a child. You tried to silence him forever. But today, his voice is louder than ever." He turned to the officers. "Take him away." As the guards pulled Raymond to his feet, he shouted, "This isn't over." But it was, because for the first time, the monster was behind bars, and the boy was free. After the storm, outside the courtroom, reporters rushed toward Malik. He didn't speak to them. He held Ms. Carter's hand and walked toward the car. But just before getting in, he looked up at the sky and whispered, "Mom, I kept my promise. I didn't stay silent." Ms. Carter looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You were brave, so brave." Malik nodded. "Now can we get ice cream?" She laughed. "Yes, Malik. As much as you want." 2 weeks had passed since Raymond was sent to jail. Malik had moved to a new city, new home, new school, new life. But not everything felt new. At night, he still had nightmares. He still jumped when doors slammed. He still looked over his shoulder when walking alone. Miss Carter noticed. She wanted to help. A strange feeling. One rainy afternoon, Malik sat in his room, staring at the old backpack he brought from the group home. It was torn at the side, stained with soot, and it still smelled like smoke from the fire. He had never really looked inside. It had just followed him through shelters, schools, and courts. But today, something inside told him to open it. The letter hidden inside. He pulled out an old shirt, a broken toy, and then a folded paper, crumpled, brown at the edges. It had his name on it. His hands shook. He opened it slowly. The writing was soft, almost faded, but he could still read it. It was a letter. From his mother. Her final words, "My sweet boy, Malik, if you are reading this, it means I couldn't protect you the way I wanted. But please remember, you are stronger than you think. If anything happens to me, find Miss Carter. She is a fighter, like you. And no matter what lies they tell you, know this. You are not the monster. You are my sunshine. I love you. Always." Tears ran down Malik's face. He held the paper close to his chest and whispered, "I missed you, Mom." The call to Miss Carter. That night, he called Miss Carter. "I found something," he said quietly. "A letter. From her." He didn't have to say who her was. Miss Carter's voice softened. "Do you want me to come over?" "Yes," he said. "Please." She arrived in less than an hour. They sat at the table, Malik reading the letter out loud. Miss Carter held her breath the whole time. The secret inside the letter. Then something caught Miss Carter's eye. "Wait," she said. "There's writing on the back." Malik turned the letter over. It was a name and an address. Mr. Harlan Brooks, 215 Maple Lane, Richmond, Virginia. Malik frowned. "Who's that?" Miss Carter looked shocked. "That was your mom's old lawyer, a private investigator too. She must have trusted him." She paused. "I think he knows more." Road trip to the truth. The next day, Miss Carter packed her car. "Ready?" she asked. Malik nodded. The trip took 6 hours. Malik didn't talk much. He stared out the window, clutching the letter the whole time. When they arrived, the house looked old, but cared for. Flowers lined the porch. Miss Carter knocked on the door. A man in his 70s opened it. "Can I help you?" She held out the letter. "We came for answers. The truth comes out." Mr. Brooks read the letter. His hands shook. "I remember her," he said. "Your mother. She was strong. She came to me months before the fire." He looked at Malik. "She told me someone was after her. She believed Raymond was hiding something bigger. Not just abuse. A whole network." Miss Carter leaned forward. "What kind of network?" "People," Mr. Brooks whispered. "Men like Raymond were part of a ring. Hurting children. Selling lies. She was close to exposing them." Malik's heart raced. That's why she died. One last lead. Mr. Brooks opened a drawer and pulled out a file. "I've kept this locked away, waiting for someone brave enough to follow it." He handed it to Miss Carter. Inside were names, photos, addresses. Dangerous people. "You two need to be careful," he warned. "These men don't want the truth coming out." Malik looked up. "I'm not scared anymore." The days after Malik and Miss Carter returned from Richmond felt like a whirlwind. They had so much information, so many names, so many faces, but they had to move carefully. The people they were dealing with weren't just criminals. They were powerful, dangerous, and they didn't want the truth to come out. A quiet victory. Malik didn't sleep much. At night, he lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what would happen next. He could hear Miss Carter working late into the night in her office, making calls, organizing files, and preparing for the biggest move of their lives. But Malik wasn't just watching from the sidelines anymore. No, he had a role to play too. The letter from his mother had lit a fire inside him. He wasn't just a scared little boy anymore. He was ready to fight. And it started with the people they could trust. Gathering allies. Miss Carter called in some help. A few trusted friends. People who could make things happen without drawing too much attention. There was a retired cop, an old lawyer, and even a hacker who could break into the databases of the criminals they were after. Malik sat with them one night as they planned. "You sure you're ready?" one of the men, Mr. Dalton, asked. He was tall with gray hair and thick glasses. Malik nodded without hesitation. "I'm ready." Miss Carter smiled at him, proud but also worried. "We're doing this the right way. No violence, no danger, just the truth." But Malik knew something else was coming. He could feel it. The first strike. 2 days later, they made their first move. Miss Carter had tracked down one of the names from the file. Edward Hawkins, a well-known businessman with a clean record. But according to Mr. Brooks, he was one of the men hiding something terrible. They planned to get into his office. Malik and Ms. Carter arrived early, pretending to be potential clients for one of his companies. The office was sleek, modern, and filled with expensive furniture. It smelled like money. They walked in confidently, Malik holding a folder filled with fake documents. The receptionist smiled at them. "How can I help you?" "We have an appointment with Mr. Hawkins," Ms. Carter said smoothly, her voice calm but firm. The receptionist nodded and led them to the elevator. Confrontation in the office. When they stepped out of the elevator, they were greeted by two security guards. They must have known something was up, but Ms. Carter was quick. "I'm Ms. Carter, and this is Malik. We need to speak to Mr. Hawkins immediately." Before the guards could stop them, she slid the folder under their noses. "This is about his secret dealings with children. You don't want to get in our way." The guards hesitated, looking at each other. Something in her voice made them back off. Inside, Mr. Hawkins sat behind his desk. He didn't look worried. In fact, he looked smug. Well, what do we have here?" he said, leaning back in his chair. "I know why you're here, but you've made a mistake." Malik didn't blink. He was done being afraid. "You're a liar," he said, his voice steady. "I know what you've done." The twist. Mr. Hawkins laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, kid." He stood up and walked over to a hidden safe in the wall. As he opened it, Malik felt a cold rush of fear. Hawkins pulled out a folder, the same kind of folder that Malik and Miss Carter had. He had the evidence, the names, the dates, the addresses. But there was something else. A new document, a list of other names. "Is that your next move?" Hawkins said, tossing the papers on the desk. "You think you're the only ones who have information." Malik's stomach dropped. He didn't know what this meant, but he knew it wasn't good. The dangerous game. Ms. Carter stepped forward, her eyes flashing with anger. "You think we're afraid of you. We're exposing you, Hawkins, all of you." But Hawkins wasn't done. "You don't realize who's behind this, do you? You're not just fighting me. You're fighting a system." Malik felt his heart race. What system? Who else was involved? Before Ms. Carter could answer, the phone on Hawkins's desk rang. He answered it, then paused. "Looks like we have company," Hawkins said with a twisted smile. "Good luck, Ms. Carter, but I don't think you'll get far." He hung up the phone and turned to Malik. "We'll see how long you last before you break." The chase begins. As Malik and Ms. Carter left the building, they were surrounded by cars. At least 5 black SUVs followed them as they sped through the city. Malik felt his heart pounding as they took a sharp turn into an alley. "Hold on," Ms. Carter shouted. She hit the gas pedal. They were being followed, and they knew it, but they weren't giving up. Ms. Carter turned into a narrow street and parked the car behind a row of dumpsters. The two of them crouched low in the seats. "We need to get to the warehouse," Ms. Carter said. Now, the night was thick with tension, the kind that weighs down on the chest and makes it hard to breathe. Malik sat in the back of Ms. Carter's car, his hands clenched into fists, his mind racing. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew it was the last chance to bring everything to light. They were driving through the dark streets, the city lights flickering past them like ghosts. Their destination, the old warehouse on the edge of town. It had once been a place for honest workers, but now it was a hub for shady deals and hidden truths. If they were going to stop the people pulling the strings, they needed to get to that warehouse, and they needed to do it before it was too late. The ticking clock. Ms. Carter glanced at Malik in the rearview mirror, her face tense. She had a plan, but she wasn't sure it would work. They were outnumbered, and the people they were up against were dangerous. But there was something about Malik that made her believe in the impossible. His strength, his courage. The way he'd refused to back down, even when he was scared. "We're almost there," she said, her voice steady, though her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. "Stay calm. Stick to the plan. We expose them tonight." Malik nodded, though inside, his heart was pounding. The last few weeks had been a blur. He had learned so much, seen so much, but the truth was bigger than he had ever imagined. He wasn't just fighting for his own freedom now. He was fighting for the freedom of everyone who had been hurt by the people who had controlled the city from the shadows. The warehouse. When they arrived, the warehouse looked abandoned. The windows were covered in grime, and the doors were locked with thick chains. But Malik and Ms. Carter weren't intimidated. They had everything they needed. The documents, the names, the connections. It was all about to come to an end. Ms. Carter got out of the car first. "Get ready," she said, turning to Malik. Malik followed her, his feet moving faster than his thoughts. He was ready to face whatever came next. For once, the fear didn't control him. He was ready to stop running, to stop hiding. They reached the back door of the warehouse, where a small, hidden keypad waited. Miss Carter pulled out a small device from her bag. It was a hacker's tool, something she had been working on for days. She plugged it into the keypad and pressed a button. A few seconds later, the door clicked open. Inside the warehouse. The air inside the warehouse was thick with dust and the smell of old machinery. Shadows stretched across the walls, and the only sound was the faint hum of fluorescent lights flickering overhead. It was almost as if the place was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "Stay close," Ms. Carter whispered. Malik nodded, his eyes darting around, searching for any sign of danger. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew that everything they had worked for was leading up to this moment. They were about to confront the people who had caused so much pain. People who had thought they were untouchable. They moved through the warehouse, past rows of old crates and equipment. At the far end, Malik saw a door. It was slightly ajar, the only thing separating them from the truth. The confrontation. They reached the door, and Miss Carter pushed it open slowly. Inside, a group of men sat around a table, their faces lit by the glow of a laptop screen. They didn't notice Malik and Miss Carter enter at first. But then one of them looked up, and when he saw them, his face went pale. "Well, well," the man said, standing up slowly. His voice was cold, dismissive. "I wasn't expecting visitors. What do you think you're going to do, Carter?" Malik stepped forward, his voice low but steady. "We're here to make sure you don't hurt anyone else. It's over." The man laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You really think you can stop this? You're just a kid." Malik didn't flinch. "I'm not a kid anymore," he said. "And I know what you've been doing. All of it. The children you've hurt. The lies you've told." Miss Carter stepped up beside him, her gaze unwavering. "You've been running this city from the shadows, but not anymore. We have the proof. The whole world will know the truth." The men at the table stood up, their eyes narrowing. One of them, a tall, imposing figure, stepped forward. "You think you can expose us? You think we'll just let you walk away?" The tension breaks. For a moment, it seemed like everything was hanging by a thread. The men looked ready to pounce, but Ms. Carter and Malik stood their ground. They had the evidence, they had the names, and they weren't going to let fear stop them. Then, the sound of sirens filled the air. The men froze. Malik could see the panic in their eyes. They had been caught. The door to the warehouse slammed open, and a group of police officers rushed in, led by Detective Rivers. He had been working with Miss Carter the whole time. Together, they had set up the final trap. "You're under arrest," Detective Rivers said, his voice firm. "All of you." The men tried to resist, but it was too late. The truth had already been exposed. The last words. As the police handcuffed the criminals, Malik stood silently. He looked around the warehouse, feeling a strange sense of peace. It was over. Miss Carter placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did it, Malik. You helped bring them down." Malik nodded, his heart still racing. He had faced his fears, spoken the truth, and helped stop the people who had hurt so many. But there was one thing he needed to say. "I'm not a kid anymore," he said softly, looking up at Miss Carter. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." And for the first time, he truly believed it.